Good evening, good evening. This is your servant and Senator, Carla Joseph, welcoming you to another segment of my bi-weekly talk show, On Point. Thank you for joining me every other Tuesday here on WSTA Radio, the People Station, 1340 on the AM dial, to bring you up to date on my work, share information on matters of concern, and highlight the work of people and organizations in our community. Tonight, we will focus our discussion on the Virgin Islands History Month, which is also Women's Month, and the Virgin Islands Office of Historic Preservation. Tonight's discussion, we're going to be having with us a very knowledgeable individual, and he's my special guest, about historic preservation. And I'm talking about none other than Mr. Sean L. Krigger, the Director of the State Historic Preservation Office. He is the preeminent expert on structures as well as common areas of significance to the history of our beloved Virgin Islands. Welcome, Mr. Krigger, to On Point.
Thank you, Senator Joseph. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. Our discussion tonight is part one in a two-part discussion for the month of March, which I mentioned earlier is Virgin Islands History Month. Our islands have a rich history, and we will share some of that history on tonight's program. Virgin Islands History Month was established in 2006 by Act 6802, which was sponsored by my good friend, the Honorable Sean Michael Malone. Every March, we recognize the extraordinary history and culture of our Virgin Islands and the achievements and contributions of its people. We'll focus and to discuss in tonight's segment with our special guest some of those significance. March, I also want to mention, as I mentioned before, but I'll mention it again, it's very worthy to mention, is Women's History Month. Women's History Month is an annual observance to highlight the contributions of women to events in history and contemporary society. Here are a couple historic notes that combine Virgin Islands History Month and Women's History Month. We celebrate Lucinda Millen, who was born on St. John on August 25th, 1892. Her early education began on the island of St. John and later on Antigua, where she was sent to further her formal training. In 1954, incidentally, that was the year of the Organic Act, Millen became the first woman elected to the Virgin Islands legislature. One of her focus was on living conditions of the elderly. Millen was successful in getting a home built for our elderly population, and it still stands today, the Lucinda Millen Home for the Elderly. Also, I want to focus in on another trailblazer in her own right, Dr. Marcella Nunez Smith, a Yale professor hailing from the Virgin Islands, was named by President Joseph Biden as co-chair for his coronavirus task force with a special focus on racial and ethnic equity. Now we're going to highlight some young people. One young lady who is a major star, none other than Miss Aaliyah Boston, a professional basketball player for the Indiana Fever, is the Virgin Islands woman, the first Virgin Islands woman to play in the Women's National Basketball Association, the WNBA. In 2023, Aaliyah was named the WNBA Rookie of the Year in a unanimous vote. Some of her many accolades and awards include WNBA All-Star, WNBA All-Rookie Team, WNBA Field Goal Percentage Leader, the AP WNBA Rookie of the Year, and the AP WNBA Rookie Team of the Year. All of these awards that I just spoke of occurred in the year 2023, last year. Now, during Women's History Month, we recognize March 10th as Harriet Tubman Day, and everybody know who Harriet Tubman was. She led a number of slaves through the Underground Railroad to freedom in the United States. The 101st Congress passed a resolution to honor Harriet Tubman with a day named in her honor, Harriet Tubman Day. Harriet Ross Tubman, born into slavery in Booktown, Maryland, escaped slavery in 1848 and became a conductor on the Underground Railroad, where she reportedly made 19 trips to lead hundreds of slaves to freedom. Tubman spoke on behalf of the movement to abolish slavery. She served in the Civil War as a soldier, spy, nurse, scout, and cook, and as a leader in working with newly freed slaves, and continued to fight for human dignity, human rights, opportunity, and justice. She died at her home in Auburn, New York on March 10th, 1913. And we also want to celebrate again Women's Month. One of the most famous and one of my favorite organizations, I was a part of that movement, I served as a leader, is March 12th is Girl Scouts birthday. I loved being a Girl Scout leader. And the week of March 10th to the 16th is Girl Scout Week. Girl Scout is an empowering organization that works with young ladies through a variety of programs to grow character, skills, and find their voice in our community, and to go on to make positive changes on items that are most important to them. Thank you to the many troop leaders who continue to carry the mantle. In earlier years, as I mentioned, I served as a Girl Scout leader. I actually also earned a Leader of the Year award from my troop. Wow, those were some fantastic and most enjoyable times. So I am very much equipped and get really excited to talk about building up our young ladies. Just a quick note, on Sunday, March 10th is Daylight Savings. Daylight Savings will return, and we will be on the same time as Eastern states in the U.S. I know a lot of us have that challenge. Even when I'm having meetings with some individuals and stakeholders in the States, we always have to negotiate the time frame. But I'm happy that they are going back to our time. They're coming to our time now. And now, before we ask Sean to speak, the Committee on Government Operations and Veterans Affairs, we met last week, Tuesday, February 27th, right here in the Earl B. Otley Legislative Hall, and two of the legislations that I sponsored, namely Bill number 35-0223, which is an act renaming the portion of Gamalgada, the William A. Industrial Street. That would be the street where Weeks and Weeks Bakery is located, as well as Christian Unity Church. Pastor Bishop Dr. William A. Industrious have been serving that community and doing a great job of it for over 20 years. And so we are naming that street in his honor. And next, Bill number 35-0226 is a bill which we are penalizing individuals who fail to provide the required documentation and come before the Division of Paternity and Child Support to show their finances so that they can pay their fair share of taking care of their children. The non-custodial parents specifically can pay their fair share in child support. We have a number of individuals, non-custodial parents, who don't show up for the hearing. They don't come. They get timely service to show up and summons to show up, and they fail because they know, they're very shrewd. They know that if they don't show up, the penalty that they will pay would be $250 only, and that penalty would stay there and become permanent after 2 years. So we are going to encourage them by giving them a higher penalty of $1,000 for the first child, and that's for them who don't show up. That's the default minimum, is being raised to $1,000 for first child, and then $150 for the second and each additional child. So that bill is a real game changer. Everyone should know we had the kids count for 2022, and it showed that we have a large population of young people who are in poverty in the Virgin Islands, with about 33%. How is that? How can we be enduring it? I just had a conversation today with someone, and the discussion surrounded little leaguers. The coaches them are even up in arms. Coaches them have to go get into their own pockets to help the custodial parents who are trying their very best to provide for their child, and have that child involving in Little League, but they can't afford to even buy the bats. They can't afford to buy some of the cleats and the uniform and all of that. So some of the coaches are saying that they have to go into their own pockets to help support this child, when they have a non-custodial parent who don't want to step up to the plate and pay their fair share. That is unconscionable. They need to pay their fair share. So my colleagues, most of them on the Committee on Government Operations and Veterans Affairs and Consumer Protection, they saw the wisdom of it, and they said, yes, we have to hold them accountable, and they need to come in and provide the required documentation so that they pay their fair share. So this isn't penalizing anyone who willingly and come in and comply. This is for individuals who are non-compliant, non-custodial parent. The other item I wanted to mention is that I really have to thank the Division of Paternity and Child Support, Ms. Catherine DeLugo, for really sitting down with me and having the time, her as well as the attorneys at the Division of Paternity and Child Support, having a very in-depth and long conversation with me regarding this issue. And this isn't just happening here in the Virgin Islands where you see an increase. It's also happening stateside and even there in Puerto Rico, where you see a lot of people don't come in to pay, or to get the required information so that they could do the calculation to determine what their fair share, the non-custodial fair share of payment will be for to support their child. Now, enough about that. I want to say, Mr. Krigger, we have some time still. And so with all of that being said, welcome. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Okay. So first of all, tell our listening and viewing audience about the work of the Office of Historic Preservation.
Well, thank you, Senator Joseph, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. First, I'd like to acknowledge that the State Historic Preservation Office, we are part of the Department of Planning and Natural Resources. And I say greetings to our commissioner and my colleagues and fellow co-workers at DPNR. So we are charged with implementing and enforcing the historic preservation laws, both on a national level and a local level. So we have our local Antiquities and Cultural Properties Act that administers and regulates all things related to its history in the Virgin Islands. And then we also have a mandate from the National Historic Preservation Act, and that relates to federal undertakings, federal projects.
Okay, wonderful. Now, we are always battling, and I say we, our people, because we see a lot of derelict buildings and blighted neighborhoods because land owners may not have the ability to do the maintenance and upkeep and even rebuild in the historic areas. So tell us which areas are the historic areas, and we're going to just focus on St. Thomas and St. John.
Okay.
In St. Thomas and St. John, are there places where you have the perimeters and the boundaries? What includes the historic areas in St. Thomas? Let's start off there.
Okay, so for St. Thomas, the core area is the downtown Charlotte and Raleigh area.
Okay.
And just roughly, if you know the Tunic area, the Belgian Road,
Yes.
all of that, up to Lionel Roberts Stadium,
Wow.
Up Street, Garden Street, Savan, and
Wow.
a very small segment of Down Street.
Wow, that's a large area. That includes the area that I just renamed in honor of Bishop Dr. William Alfred Industrious.
That's correct, and actually that is something that should be consulted with the Historic Preservation Committee, the renaming of our historic street names and stuff like that.
Well, that could take place in the future, but we had a very good discussion with Mr. Chris George. I think his name is George and he is like, we need to start looking at renaming, but we didn't rename the whole of Gamel Gardner.
Okay.
Just a section of it. Just a little section of it from the corner to the end of that street. So you have the whole Gamel Gardner still extended out of there.
Right.
But next time, we can, but the legislature has done that. Even, I think we renamed Eldridge Schulterbrand Street, that comes off piece there too.
Yeah, General Gardner.
Yes.
For Mr. Brown.
Yes. I remember those being renamed.
Yeah.
So what we have been doing is definitely looking at small portions that we could rename to honor individuals who have done extraordinary work in the Virgin Islands and should be represented throughout our history.
Yes.
Okay, now let's have a discussion on what some of the challenges that the Historic Preservation Office has faced or continue to face.
Well, for us, I don't think SHPO portion, we don't really have much challenges. I must say we're fortunate that our program is funded through the National Park Service. We could definitely use more funding on the local side, and I know the legislature does its best through the allotment process to do that. The Historic Preservation Commission program, I think that's where we have more of a challenge. And you highlighted some of it, Senator. We do have a challenge in the historic districts where, property owners, for a number of reasons, not just one specific thing, but there is a lack of funding to help to restore our historic buildings. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge because it's so complex. If it was just one aspect, maybe it could be more easier to tackle.
But it's a really complex aspect that they have to go through. They have to look at specific materials. You have to look at the design of the building, all of that. When you said it's multiple aspects, give us an example.
Thank you. So some buildings might be derelict, not because the owner doesn't have an interest in fixing it. They may not have the direct legal interest. Probate aspects complicates things. Some are genuinely abandoned. They literally just abandoned. The owner died. They don't have any inheritance.
So what, have you been privy to any of those situations where the owner may have passed and they don't have any inheritance? What happens to those type of buildings? How are they disposed of? How do you get ownership of those type of buildings?
Yeah, actually there are like two cases I could explain. So
excellent.
I know one case where The owners were living in another country.
Mm-hmm.
They saw to it that a will was, put together, and they transferred, their will transferred title of the property that they owned here in the Virgin Islands, in the historic district, to another individual.
Mm-hmm.
But the person who was put in charge of the probate process apparently didn't file something correctly.
Uh-oh.
So the person who was supposed to inherit the property never knew he had actually got this property.
Wow.
So when his family went to do probate, it was missed. So literally that property is just sitting in limbo. That's one example.
So it's just sitting there in limbo now?
Sitting in limbo.
Well, how many years is that?
Oh God. It's quite a while.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
So ultimately the Lieutenant Governor's office will handle that through like the tax process, collections of delinquent taxes
yes.
and so forth.
And they may have to sell it.
Yeah, you may have to sell it. That's one example. We have another example where we know the person that owns it. They have been trying their best, and because they're away, they've been trying their best to get the title moved from one name to the other. Their family member gave them the property, but this has just been like a long legal process, and they have legal representation, but it's just been tied up in probate. Meanwhile, the property is being occupied. It's the squatters in there, and they're dealing with it like if they pretty much own it.
Oh my goodness. So what legal recourse can anyone have? Because if you have squatters in there, that means you may be a derelict building, blighted, and it may be not safe for squatters to be in there. I'm thinking squatters, does it have electricity? Because how do you get electricity in a building that you can't show that you have a lease or ownership of?
Exactly. So there's no formal power hookup, no formal water hookup. So whatever they do,
It's a safety issue?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely going to be a safety issue.
It's a safety issue. And we could be culpable because we know it's happening and we don't have public safety department of the police department go and seal it up, especially if we know there are vagrants and squatters living in there. So that's us as far as enforcement is concerned. We have to get it boarded up so that they can't go in there anymore, because then the government may be liable, possibly. Okay, so tell us about some of the major historic sites on St. Thomas. I want to just focus on St. Thomas, and then we could, if we have time, we have a few minutes still, and focus on St. John. That is of significance to Virgin Islands, especially knowing that this is Virgin Islands History Month.
Okay. Well, I'll start with our historic town of Charlotte Amalie. It is one of the preeminent cities in the Caribbean. Charlotte Amalie, it's a very unique town, a rich history. When you look at, how it was established, its mercantile history goes back, from the 1600s, basically. And it's other thing too. When these islands were part of the Kingdom of Denmark, Charlotte Amalie was the third largest city in the Kingdom of Denmark.
Wow.
Yeah, both in population, but also the economic activity that was taking place.
The third?
Third largest city.
Wow.
Yeah.
What about our sister island of St. John?
Well, St. John, I think the most important historical note that we could make is the 1733
fireborn.
The revolt that took place at Fortsburg. And
Yes.
Recently over the weekend, Congresswoman Plastic was part of an unveiling ceremony for a plaque that's put up Ramshead. So that's a significant history. When it talks about the resistance and fighting for freedom of Africans in the diaspora, this is an important
1733. Very good, very good. And that's some of the key points that we really need to hone in, especially with our young people coming up. The significance of these times and our islands, and what we added to what is now our rich culture and our rich history. What do you love most about the work you do, Mr. Krigger? Because you have been at this for how many years?
Well, I've been with the department for 25 years. I had a there was a break in between there, but 25 years of working in the historic preservation program.
Right.
And what I love most about it is when I'm able to make a positive impact on the community, bringing positive change, improvements to our community, being a part of significant projects over the years, like for example, the Market Square project.
Oh yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, that was exciting.
Oh yeah, when we worked with Public Works and Department of Agriculture to improve that area, that was important to me. The waterfront project and the design elements that we've been able to help put into that project. The restoring of our little vernacular houses, whether it's in Savon or Garden Street or Up Street, bringing physical improvements to our community, that was mostly excites me. You know, we also have a regulatory part that we have to play, and that's an important part of it.
Yes.
But it's making the positive changes in our community, the restoration projects, you know, and helping homeowners. That's where it touched me the most.
Absolutely. I really loved, I've been to the ribbon cutting for the Main Street brick road. I really appreciate that, and it looks like it's so durable and long lasting. It just adds such a rich character. It just, you know, and all of the different type of street lights there. Did you have a role to play in that, the state historic preservation?
Yes, Triple had a role to play in that. Matter of fact, that goes back so many years when Senator Jackson was our director. We did a lot of research to try to replicate the old gas lamp that we used to have in Charlemagne.
Right.
But ultimately, the fixture you see there is a model out of Denmark, Copenhagen.
Oh.
Which actually is perfect because it was a Danish town. So that light fixture fits right into the
light fixture
fabric of the city.
Right, and it adds such a really rich culture. It makes you feel as though you're stepping back. I like to go there like when we have Miracle and Main Street, and it's lit. It's so beautiful just to be in that downtown Main Street area. Now, we are closing up. So, is there any last words you'd like to leave with our listening audience regarding the State Historic Preservation Office?
Yes, thank you. You know, we're here, the Historic Preservation Program, whether it's the SHPO, the HPC, we're here to help property owners to improve their properties. You know, you have a resource in these historic sites, whether it's a historic or archaeological site, and it's part of our cultural and cultural heritage. And we're here to help you. We have a lot of advice. We have a lot of technical guidance that you can utilize. That's what we're funded to do, to help you. And so I encourage property owners or just anyone that's interested in the built environment, historic heritage, reach out to us. We're located at Fort Christian in Charlemagne, and in St. Croix, we're at Fort Frederick.
Is there a telephone number that you can call you?
Yes.
And somebody's going to pick up?
Yes.
Good.
Absolutely.
What's your telephone number?
776-8605 is the number in St. Thomas.
Good. And is there a St. Croix number too?
There's a St. Croix number. Oh God, I'm drawing a blank there for a moment.
Okay, so while you draw your blank, I'm going to take up a little bit of time to announce and let our listening audience know, especially those of you who reside in the big sister island of St. Croix, that the Committee on Government Operations and Veteran Affairs and Consumer Protection, which I chair, will host a town hall meeting for the St. Croix taxi operators on this Friday, March 8, 2024, from 6 to 8 p.m. in the Fritz E. Lowette's Legislative Conference Room in St. Croix. This is going to round out the town hall meetings that my committee has been charged with holding from last year, June. So we had one in June, that was in St. John, and then we had one later on in the year in St. Thomas. So this is full circle. So we are going to complete. And this is an opportunity for our taxi operators on the Big Island of St. Croix to share their concerns and recommendations for the industry operation. The St. Croix Town Hall, as I mentioned, is the last in a series of meetings to hear from our taxi operators in the territory about their needs and services provided by the Taxi Cab Commission and any other concerns that they may have. Following the town hall meeting, I will have a robust discussion on some of the items that we discuss with the taxi cab executive director who plans to be there. She may not be in person, but she probably, chances are she will be joining us remotely. Also, before we close out, because our time is short, you got the number for
Yes.
St. Croix?
St. Croix 719-7089.
Okay, and also this is Virgin Islands History Month, and my office, as we've done for 4 years, we are sponsoring an art competition. This is our 4th annual art competition that is open to students in middle school, that's 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, to provide your rendering of a person who you hold as your hero, a Virgin Islander who is your hero. And you can always visit my website at Senator Carla Joseph.com or call my office at 693-3515. The artwork submission deadline is March 31st, 2024. We sent out flyers to all of the middle schools, so your school should have it. And last year, I hung proudly the rendering that was done by Miss Ava Daniel, and before that it was a Miss St. Paul, and the first one who ever won it was Miss Rhonda Welsh. I had to go into my memory bank. So I'm looking forward. I'm really excited to see who this 4th annual art competition winner will be. Now, we're going to just do a quick closeout, and I want to thank you, Mr. Krigger, for being here with us this evening. You can listen to On Point on WSTA Radio. Our next broadcast is scheduled for March 19th, when we will continue our discussion on VI History Month. Again, stay on point, Virgin Islands, and God bless.